One of the actions that came from last year's annual conference was a motion that said budgets needed to be lavishly communicated. That's what we're trying to do here today. We've made 12 visits throughout the state of Iowa. We're creating this item on the web today. And we're going to continue to talk about the budget as much as possible because it's critical that you, as the members of the annual conference, understand this budget because this is your budget. As I've looked at the annual conference, I've really found that there's three types of people. First, there's those that understand the conference budget. You know what? I have found out I can count on my two hands the number of people that fully understand the conference budget, and I still have fingers left over. Secondly, there's the people that don't understand the conference budget. And lastly, there's those that don't care about the conference budget. So, it's my job to make sure those that don't understand the conference budget understand the conference budget. That's very important to us today. That's very important to us long term. And then, I'm kind of a budgeting geek. If you don't care about the budget, you also kind of hurt my feelings, and so I want to elevate you so that everybody understands the conference budget. So, I'm going to get to business first and foremost. The Council on Finance and Administration is going to ask for a $16 million, $14,097 in apportionments in 2015. This is $259,000 less than the 2014 apportionment ask. This is a 1.59% decrease in apportionments from 2014 to 2015. This is also a decrease in apportionment ask over the past 5 years. There's a negative growth rate from 5 years ago. Now, in understanding the budget. About 4 months ago, I interviewed at the conference center for the job of treasurer. Whenever you have a job interview, you're supposed to come up with questions that you ask the people that are interviewing you. And I came up with one really good question. And it was, so, who exactly do I report to? And you know what happened? The entire room laughed at me. They laughed quite loud, actually. There's several in the room right now that were on the interview committee. They laughed at me. The real answer to that question is, I report to the Iowa Conference. My position is elected by the Iowa Conference at the annual conference. I report directly to the Council on Finance and Administration, but I have a lot of dotted line responsibilities, be it the Board of Pension, the Board of Trustees, all the boards that I service over, obviously the bishop, the cabinet, and many other people. And so it's a little bit of a confusing question. And so there I was on the first week, and it was time to start making the budget. And you'll recognize this sheet. It's in the handout that you should be able to print off from an online attachment as page 2. But this is the budget that's put in the annual conference, pre-conference materials every year as the conference budget. So I just simply had one question to a member of the staff, and I asked the question, where exactly do I get paid out of? Well, he laughed at me. I get paid out of multiple lines on this budget. I get paid from Council on Finance and Administration and the Board of Trustees. So I find this budget to be very confusing, and obviously that's why it's so hard for people to understand. As you look at this traditional budget that you see, I want you to understand 3 lines on here. If you go about a third of the way down the page, you're going to see a line that says contingency to pay general church apportionments at 100%. Halfway down the page, you're going to see a line that says allowance for uncollectible conference ministries. And then almost all the way down the page, you're going to see allowance for uncollectible conference missions. You know, those are the 3 lines I want you to understand because we've made a change in the way we demonstrate the budget. In the past, if you were given a budget of $100,000 to do conference missional work, congratulations. But only spend about $80,000 of that because there's going to be a spending limit on that. And then as we get later in the year, we'll see how things go, and we might adjust that to be about $78,000. And so congratulations. You have a $100,000 budget to do missional work, but spend about $78,000 of it. We wonder why people were confused about our budgets. That's the way we presented our budgets in the past. The Council on Finance and Administration made the decision, actually before I was even here, fortunately, that we're going to show the percentage of apportionments projected in the budget on single lines. In the past, it's a known fact, all apportionments are not collected. That was, the uncollected apportionments was put in everybody's budget previously. Now it's put on those 3 lines. Therefore, if you're given a budget to do $100,000 of missional work, please go do $100,000 of missional work. Make sure you do that, because that's what the conference wants you to do. And that's the way the budgets are structured from now on. And so those uncollectible allowances are on 3 single lines, and the budget is the budget and the dollars that we want you to use. Now, I'm going to have you turn the page over to page 3 in the handout that you have. And this is a budget that I'm going to talk about now, and I hope it's one you understand better so you can take with you what is in the conference budget. It puts it into simpler buckets, and probably even buckets that you will be able to recognize to start with. So we're going to go through this piece by piece. The first part on the top of the page is the general church totals. We're a connectional organization. Churches are connected to the conference. The conference is also connected up to the general church. The conference pays apportionments to the general church. I want everybody to understand these slides going forward because I'm going to use them over and over again. At the very top, you're going to see this is the general church. On the top right-hand corner, you're going to see that the apportionment total for the general church in 2015 is $2.4 million. That's 18.2% of the total apportionment asked this year. Then you're going to see the people within the conference that amount of apportionment's paid for. In this case, for the past 3 years, it's 1 full-time person. And right here is listing who it is. The general church pays for our resident bishop and most of his expenses. Our general church apportionments go to many things within the connection. The Episcopal Fund, which we will give $367,000, pays for bishops. Not just our bishop. It goes into a pool. It goes into the pool that pays for all of the bishops, both active and retired. And there's a growing number of retired bishops, and it's my understanding that's a growing percentage of that cost, but it's the pool that pays for all of the bishops. From that comes the expenses, the salary for our resident bishop, but it contributes to others throughout the connection. Other things are done within this budget. There's the Ministerial Education Fund, which is $220,000. General Church Administration, North Central Jurisdictional Administration. The World Service Fund. That's the missional work that the United Methodist Church does around the world. There's also contributions to the Black College Fund and Africa University. And so that's where $2.4 million, or 18% of our apportionment expenses go. Next, the administration. The general church handles most of the bishop's expenses, the bishop's salary. There is a group needed to support the bishop. That's what the bishop's office is. That's $289,000, or 2.2% of our total apportionment expenses. Several years ago, it was up to 4 full-time equivalents. In 2015, we will have 2 full-time equivalents out of that office and 1 part-time person. And those people, as you can see listed on there, are our Assistant to Bishop of Administration, who is now Bill Poland, our Executive Assistant to the Bishop, and our part-time administrative assistant in that office. The next slide, I finally figured out where I get paid. It's within the finance department here. The finance department has gone from 6 people 2 years ago to next year it will be 4 people. That includes myself, our controller, our staff accountant, and an AP accountant. The price of the finance group is $498,000 per year, or 3.7% of your apportionments. This isn't just the staff. This covers several other things beyond that. It covers the cost of the audit for both the Board of Pension, the conference, and the conference. It includes software that's required to account for all of those things. And it also accounts for certain legal fees that are just a fact of life in today's world. The finance group manages approximately $35 million in annual expenses for both the conference, the Board of Pensions, and other organizations. And it also manages $60 million in assets for all of those organizations. Quite a bit of financial responsibility for 4 people. Our benefits and HR department. 2013, it was 3 people. This year, it's 2 people. Next year, we're going back to 3 people. The benefits office handles the benefits for 1,500 active and retired clergy throughout the conference. It handles their benefits, their retirements, their pensions, things that are very important personally to people, as you would well know. This is a case where, as we look at the conference and the conference center, we've tried to be very careful in our utilization of staff. However, in 2014, we pulled back to 2 full-time staff members. With 1,500 people to service and very important people that we need to service well, we can't offer the level of service that we want, nor handle the paperwork that's required to help these people. So this is a place that we are going to add an additional person in 2015 to make sure that we fully service the benefits of our active and retired clergy. Our information technology department is $247,000, or 1.9% of our total expenses. There's 2 people in that department, but there's more than just the people. They service the IT equipment within the conference, the district offices, and quite honestly do a lot of helping out wherever they can in churches throughout the state. In addition to the staff in there, there's $60,000 of annual capital expenses in that number. Within the conference, we replace all of our equipment on a 4-year cycle. I think most people understand that computers wear out after a certain number of years. Many companies do it on a 3-year cycle, some do it on a 4. We've taken it on the more conservative 4-year basis, and we know that that laptop right there is 3 years old and will be replaced next year. And we have a very set schedule for replacing all of the conference equipment on an annual basis so we can be useful of the investment, but at the same time keep ourselves up to date as is required. Our communications department is $360,000, or 2.7% of our apportionment expenses. There's a case where we had 3 full-time people in 2013, and now we have 1 full-time person and 2 part-time people. The communications department does a lot of stuff. I hope you've been to our conference websites. Always new, always current content. That communications budget is responsible for that website, which is in process of being updated, as well as 8 district websites that they're also working on updating. They also help churches, about 20 to 25 per year, and give them websites so that they can communicate with their congregations, with their members. Also, the communications department is responsible for publishing the Reporter, a monthly print publication, handling the communications through email and on our website of the conference. It's an impressive group. There's a lot of current content, and honestly, there's a place that our communications department, if there's something that they're not covering, please talk with them. Talk with them at the conference. They always want to service our community and make sure that they're adding more and more content for the purpose of the Iowa Conference. The Archives Department, $23,000 per year in apportionments, or about 0.2%. There's a part-time person. She's based in Mount Pleasant and handles the archives of the conference. The Conference Center. The physical Conference Center building costs $688,000 per year, or 5.2% of our apportionments. This is a place where I like to stop and see the size of that number, because we need to talk about this number and understand what our responsibilities are as a conference. Within that $688,000 number, there's an annual mortgage of $244,000. There's utilities and maintenance of $210,000 per year. And there's one more thing that's not even listed on there. We have $90,000 of leased equipment for mailing and postage. This is something for us to think about. We built the current conference center based on annual conference actions in the early 2000s. And we're still paying for it and will be paying for it for many years. So any decisions we make today, we have to remember that people in the future may be paying for. Another thing is that mailing lease was a 10-year lease. 10 years for mailing equipment in today's world. And that's something we're going to be paying $90,000 a year for until halfway through 2016. So we got another full year and a year and a half on that. As conference treasurer, I'm never going to sign a 10-year lease like that. We're going to keep equipment leases to a maximum of 3 years. And we're going to be very careful about our long-term investments because this is a lot of money to be carrying year after year. Another commitment that we have as a conference, and I have as treasurer because building operations are one of my other duties as assigned, is we're going to be carefully managing this expense. You're going to see that this is a place where we're actually adding a person next year. When the conference center opened, it was decided that services such as snow removal, janitorial services, lawn service, even fixing light bulbs and maintenance within the building was going to be fully outsourced. You know, around my house, I would love to have somebody shovel my snow on those really cold days. Really, really. I hate getting up at 5:30 and shoveling the snow. I've been doing a lot of pre-conference meetings. I'd love to have somebody mow my grass because after being out at pre-conference meetings last week, my grass is about knee-high. I'm afraid I'm going to lose a child in there. I would love to have somebody clean my house for me. My wife will certify I am a terrible house cleaner. Absolutely miserable. But audience participation, there's one reason we don't. Why not? It costs too much. So, as a conference center, we're going to look at all the expenses within the conference center. 45% of the snow removal costs in this conference center are for cleaning the sidewalks. We can get somebody to blade the parking lot fairly inexpensively, but the minute they step out of the truck, that person gets much, much more expensive. There's other expenses like that that we have to be very careful of and we have to better understand. Therefore, next year we are going to put a maintenance person into the conference center. That person will be responsible for reducing the expenses, taking on these small things that are outsourced, be it fixing a light bulb or a broken door, fixing a carpet problem, or removing a tree from outside. Those are expenses that our maintenance person will be able to take on and reduce the maintenance expenses. And so one thing I want everybody in the conference to realize, this is something I take really personally. Those are the type of expenses that we need to continue to look at reducing. And so the next time you see me in 6 months, I want you to ask me one question. And it's, tell me some stories about how you've been able to remove expenses from the conference center. And I think anybody that works with me knows that I already talk about them quite a bit. But it's something that I'm passionate about, is removing those small expenses. And I want you to keep challenging me as a member of the conference. The second thing, I will almost guarantee you that when I come and talk to next year's pre-conference meeting at this time, I'll bet you I'm asking for a second conference maintenance person. Because based on a building of that size, the first person, we're going to find considerable expenses. And I think with the second person, we'll be able to truly right-size the expenses within the facility and the accompanying facilities that the conference owns to make sure that we're supporting all of those in a respectable way, as well as taking care of the facilities that the conference owns, because that's also a responsibility that we have. The annual conference sessions, the annual meeting, are about $403,000 per year. A lot of that is in the building rental itself. You're going to see that in the 2015 budget, it is higher than the 2014 budget. And you're going to ask why. Was there a big increase in rent? Remember, in 2015, we're going to have a 4-day event rather than a 3-day event as we're preparing for the general conference. And so that budget has gone up a little bit as we prepare for the extra day. There's also some staff associated with the annual conference. very part-time conference secretary, or at least her secretary responsibilities are very part-time. Our journal editor, this is the only place that we're really splitting up people, and I don't like to split up people, but probably a full time of one of the CCM assistants is preparing the pre-conference journal and all the other paperwork associated with it. Right, Felicia? And the last one is a part-time fee goes to our nominations coordinator. Clergy support is another place where 7.3% of our apportionments go, or $970,000. There's a couple major places where that goes. First of all, as we move clergy from appointment to appointment, we pay for the moves and we handle it here in the conference center. That's about $350,000 per year. Another place is equitable compensation. Equitable compensation, the Equitable Compensation Committee has a couple very important roles. First and foremost, they set a minimum salary for our clergy, deciding for the work they do, what's the minimum compensation level, and then two, they have the ability to grant, because if a clergy is in place and doing their job, they deserve to earn the minimum compensation level. And so there's $181,000 set aside for those cases where clergy aren't paid the minimum level, and we help to make sure that they are paid at the very least at the minimum level. There's $160,000 in the budget for our pastoral care department person. Dr. Mary Frazier works out of Urbandale, and she does services for a clergy across the state, both in-office visits, travel, phone calls, web conferencing. She tries to do absolutely as much as she can do to serve everybody across the state. There's about $100,000 in about 6 or 8 various programs administered by the cabinet for taking care of our clergy. And then lastly, $72,000 is set aside for credentialing and training for the Board of Ordained Ministry. Then there's our district offices. There's 8 district offices, there's 8 district superintendents, there's 8 district administrative assistants. Those district offices are about take about $2 million of our apportionment expenses per year, or 15%. Within those expenses are the salaries of those 16 individuals, a lot of travel. As you know, the district superintendents are traveling almost constantly. It also takes care of the district offices. The district offices cost us about $320,000 per year. There's 8 field outreach ministers, 1 per district. The cost of the field outreach ministers is $890,000 per year, or 6.7% of our apportionments. And again, this is salaries and a lot of travel for those field outreach ministers. Then we move on to the missions portion of our budget. The first thing is CCMC administration, where there's essentially 3 people. First of all, our assistant to the Bishop of CCMC, Karen, and 2 more administrative assistants for CCMC. Within the conference, there's a lot of boards, commissions, grant programs. There's a lot of boards and agencies to care and feed for, and that's what these folks do, is they support the large number of organizations that we have throughout the conference. They support those volunteer boards, those volunteer agencies, and they administer grant programs, and a lot of grant programs for the conference. And that's really their responsibility as CCMC administration. The next is our camps program. We have 3 camps, one in South Central Iowa, Wesley Woods, one in Eastern Iowa, Pictured Rocks, and as I like to say, one in Okoboji, which is Camp Okoboji. There's 12 full-time people in our camps program currently, and 9 part-time people working year-round. The $1 million there pays for about 40 to 50% of the total expenses of the camps on an annual basis. Our higher education, the Board of Higher Education and Campus Ministry, is $752,000 of our apportionment expenses, or 5.7%. The higher education supports, first of all, 4 Wesley foundations at the 4 largest universities in the state of Iowa: Drake University, Iowa State University, University of Northern Iowa, and University of Iowa. And those Wesley foundations are about $650,000 of our annual apportionments. In addition to the 4 Wesley foundations, we support chaplaincy programs in 4 historically Methodist colleges throughout the state. Those are Morningside, Simpson, Cornell, and Iowa Wesleyan. And those 4 chaplaincy programs are $99,000 per year of our apportionment expenses. Parish development is $528,000, or 4% of our apportionments. We have 1 full-time person in there who's actually moving to Ankeny very, very soon, and so we'll have a new full-time person in there. Our LDM of revitalization and HCI, this is really the place that really is meeting what I call 1A and 1B in our strategic priorities. The HCI initiative, or Healthy Church Initiative, is really about the revitalization of our churches, as well as looking at opportunities for new faith communities. Emerging ministries is $268,000 of our annual apportionment expenses, or 2%. This really goes to 2 funds. First of all, the Matthew 25 fund, which is distributed by the 8 districts. That's $214,000. And there's $54,000 of emerging ministries funds. Community and institutional grant programs is $222,000 of our apportionment expenses per year. These are grant programs that really focus on women, children, the poor, those that are marginalized in society. Our Hispanic Ministries program is $103,000, or 0.8% per year. Our Social Justice and Immigration program is $160,000 in apportionment expenses per year, or 1.2%. This goes into multiple programs. Iowa Justice for Our Neighbors has grants for $42,000. This also supports a conference missionary we have that's actually based in Des Moines. She's a lawyer that graduated from Drake University, and we spend $34,000 of apportionment expenses on that missionary program. In addition, there's several part-time folks involved with this. This coming year, there'll be 1 part-time LDM of social justice and 2 very part-time immigration specialists. Our missions program, which is mostly the Iowa-Nigeria Partnership, is $19,000 of apportionments per year. Youth Ministries is $39,000 in apportionments per year, which is primarily a part-time LDM in charge of youth ministries. The Board of Laity is $14,000 in apportionment expenses per year. District missions split between the 8 districts is $92,000, and others $26,000. The final thing to talk about on here is the cash reserve. The cash reserve is $500,000 of our apportionment expenses this year. This is something that our previous treasurer, Todd Weber, talked about very heavily at last year's conference. The real starts behind this came from the 2012 FACT report, which was done by the Global Board of Pensions and the General Board of Finance and Administration. They came in, the bishop invited them in, they did an analysis and a review of our operations. One of the areas they said we needed to address was the conference needed a cash reserve. At the beginning of this, why do we need a cash reserve? Well, there's a lot of different things. Just to put it most simply, over 20% of our apportionments for the year come in December. People pay them at the end of the year. 20% of our expenses don't occur in December. They occur throughout the year. We need to make sure that we have money in the bank so that we can write checks when we need to write the checks. The second reason we need a cash reserve. Remember at the beginning when I said, if I'm going to give you $100,000 of budget to do missional work, please go forward and do missional work? What if we miss our apportionments this year by $40,000? I don't want to have to, we don't want to as a conference, to have to adjust everybody's budget by 1%. We need to have that little bit of fudge like we all want in our checkbooks at all the times. So if you're slightly off with an expense, you're not changing everything and you have time to catch those behaviors. And last, we're a connectional organization. As a conference, we've gone through a lot of things. There's been floods in eastern Iowa, central Iowa, western Iowa. We've had large tornadoes hit the northern part of the state and other parts of the state. Emergencies happen to us, and they happen to us as a conference. The day that a large meteor strikes southwest Iowa, we don't want our concern to be, when are we getting our apportionments from southwest Iowa? that should not be our concern, nor will it be our concern. When that large meteor hits southwest Iowa, we want to have cash reserve on hand to make sure that we continue to do the good things the conference does and needs to do. And then secondly, we need to be able to turn around and help through the connection, southeast Iowa, at their time of need. That's why we need the cash reserve, is so that we can truly be connected in this process. So what else are we doing? So that's what I did in the first 3 weeks at work. Here's a few other things that we're really focusing on as a conference, and especially within the finance group. First of all, in the past, we had several ways of managing our expenses. We had some organizations that managed their expenses based on fund-based management. In other words, they created a bank account. They were given $100,000 to do missional work. They did $50,000 of missional work, and they built a bank account. The next year, they might have been given $100,000 to do missional work. They spent $50,000. They continued to build a bank account for a rainy day. But they always had a fund balance. You as the Iowa Conference, when $100,000 is given in a budget to do missional work, expect that $100,000 will be done in missional work. By moving to an expense-based system, we're going to make sure that $100,000 is done when $100,000 is allocated. That's very important. But besides the fund base, there was others that had fund balances. They might have been negative. And so those organizations said, well, this negative fund balance was created 12 years ago because of something that I had no control, and there's three groups of management running it later. How can I be held responsible for the fund balance from 12, 15, 132 years ago? You know, they have a point. They then would run themselves, they would say, here's the expenses that I had budgeted, therefore I'm going to spend against those expenses, and went forward. The problem is, when you have multiple methods of managing expenses, you have no method of managing expenses. Therefore, the Council on Finance and Administration has chosen the one way we're going to manage expenses going forward, and that's simple. It's expense-based. On an annual basis, budget the expenses you need. On an annual basis, manage those expenses. From a missional point of view, what that means is, I've given you $100,000 to do missional work. The conference expects you to do $100,000 of missional work. If you can't do $100,000 of missional work, let's find somewhere else that we can do missional work with those dollars. On an expense department, an operating department like the conference center, or a lot of departments that I run, or our IT department, if I'm given $100,000 to do administrative work, I'm going to try my best to not only do only $100,000, we're going to try to continue to find mechanisms to do it more efficiently and cheaper. And then this is not government. If on December 15th we've had a great year and we came in at $85,000 in expenses on a $100,000 budget, I am not going to run out and buy $15,000 of gum because I have to use it or lose it in my budget. I really like gum, but I don't need $15,000 in gum. And so from an administrative department, we're going to expect them to manage themselves against their expense budget, and on an annual basis, we'll reconsider their budget, because the reward for being under budget is not a budget below where you did. We're going to have reasonable budgets for operating departments on an annual basis, but it is not use it or lose it like state government. We expect them to manage their budget respectfully for the conference. The next thing we need to do is improve our conference reporting. As we look at our conference reporting, we have a lot of it. We have an exceptional accounting department. The audit this year is going to come out exceptionally. Things are done very well. We need to continue to find ways to give reports that everybody understands. Because as we talk about this expense-based reporting, I want to make this very transparent and public. I want you as conference members to be able to look at a particular board or a department and understand, are they spending their expenses on budget? If it's an operating department, you're going to hope that me in the building, you're going to hope that I'm coming in a little light. If it's a missional department, you're going to hope that they're spending the money that they've been given. But we need to create that transparently and in a way that you can understand. Additionally, right now, the conference sets an annual budget. One of the projects we're going to be working on, hopefully completing by fall, is we're going to create monthly budgets for the conference so that you can track along on a monthly basis where pieces and expenses are supposed to be. Right now, some budgets are evenly spread over 12 months, perhaps a salary, but other months occur in specific months. The expenses for the annual sessions occurs in the summer. Camps occur in the summer. We need to put monthly budgets so we can adequately track ourselves against that, and then create both using monthly budgets and a lot of budgets to have levels. Scorecards that can tell you green is good, red is bad, this is a place to look, but then continue to make detailed reports, very public, because we want to make sure that we have transparency of our reporting and of our operations. And the last thing is, we're going to create a 5-year budget and present to the 2015 annual conference. In that budget, we need to look ahead and determine who we want to be in 5 years. We need to accurately describe who we're going to be and make sure the budget is balanced to reflect what we want to be in the future. Each and every one of you, I hope we're able to understand the budget today as we see the buckets or the envelopes or whichever method you see, and you can see where money is sitting. And you even might come to conclusions right now. It's like, wow, as I see us moving forward, perhaps with a smaller apportionment spend in the future, we're going to have to make some adjustments, and perhaps that bucket even needs more money. There's a place that if we're going to move our strategic priorities forward, we're going to have to spend more. And other places, this might have to be balanced a little bit differently moving forward. That's the conversation we need to have. And we all need to have this. Because you are the annual conference. This is your budget. You need to understand it and make sure your voice is heard in the direction and what we look like in the future. As we develop this conference budget, we're not going to do it quietly. We're not going to do it in a vacuum. I've visited 12 cities with Karen to talk about this pre-conference and try to make this budget better understood. We're going to visit a lot more places come this fall. In September and October, we're going to be talking about the 5-year budget. We're going to be discussing it, and I'm going to be looking for your input as we figure out how we're going to rebalance our conference in the future. So those are just a few of the things that we have coming up. And so I hope as we've gotten to this, you understand the budget better. That's truly what we wanted to do, is make sure we are communicating it, but not just communicating it, but making sure you could understand it.